Nathaniel Hale adjusted his platinum watch for the third time in 5 minutes. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, the city unfurled below an empire of light and motion, humming to the rhythm of his success. At 29, he had built a tech conglomerate that disrupted global markets. And yet, as he stared into the morning haze, something inside him felt hollow. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Hale, your helicopter has been grounded due to mechanical failure. And, sir, the storm system has shut down all regional flights." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He had a multi-billion-dollar meeting with Japanese investors in Los Angeles in less than 48 hours. What's the backup plan? Another jet? Charter something? I've exhausted every private fleet in the region. Commercials are canceled too. There is one alternative. Speak. The Platinum Express, a luxury cross-country bus line. It departs in 2 hours, arrives in Los Angeles in 40. Nathaniel blinked. A bus? It's the only land option available, sir, and their clientele is typically upper class. It's not public transportation in the traditional sense. He looked at his reflection in the glass, immaculate, powerful, isolated. The meeting meant too much. He had no choice. Book it, he snapped. 2 hours later, Nathaniel found himself standing outside a silver coach, bus so sleek it looked like it belonged in a sci-fi movie. The Platinum Express shimmered like chrome under the gray sky. A concierge in a tuxedo welcomed passengers by name. "Mr. Hale, welcome aboard." As he stepped inside, Nathaniel was surprised. Leather recliners, mahogany accents, ambient lighting, individual entertainment systems, and a private minibar at each seat. Still, it was a bus, and he was out of his element. He sank into his seat and pulled out his laptop. The signal was stable. His schedule was tight. Maybe he could get through the ride without truly engaging in the experience. That was his plan, until she walked in. She moved like water fluid, calm, intentional. A navy uniform hugged her form neatly, silver trim glinting under soft cabin lights. Long black hair swept into a tidy bun, olive-toned skin smooth as porcelain. But it was her eyes bright, focused, intelligent that made Nathaniel freeze. She greeted passengers one by one, her tone professional yet warm. "Good afternoon, sir. May I check your ticket?" He fumbled it out. Their fingers touched. "Electricity. Carmen Vega," she said, reading the name on the manifest. "I'll be your driver. Let me know if you need anything." Nathaniel could only nod. He had dined with royalty, closed deals with tycoons. But Carmen Vega unsettled him. As the bus pulled onto the interstate, rain began to fall, tapping gently against the windows. Nathaniel tried to return to his emails, but something tugged at him. Carmen, her presence, her grace, her confidence behind the wheel, it all felt oddly grounding. A retired professor seated across from him leaned over. "Quite the impressive driver, isn't she? I've taken this route with her before. Best on the road." "She seems overqualified," Nathaniel muttered. "She's in law school," the professor replied. "Driving pays the bills, helps her support her mother and younger sister." Nathaniel was intrigued. His world revolved around inheritance, leverage, and acquisitions. Carmen's, it seemed, revolved around grit, sacrifice, and purpose. That night, while passengers slept, he watched Carmen leaf through a thick legal textbook during her break. She highlighted sections, scribbled notes. Her focus didn't waver. He approached quietly. "You study constitutional law?" Carmen looked up, surprised. "I do. Keeps me awake." "How long until you graduate?" "If I survive next semester." He smiled. She returned it, just a little. "What about you?" she asked. "Tech industry. Built a company, or rather, inherited a name and built around it." She nodded, not overly impressed. "Must be nice." "Not always." Their conversation paused. Rain streaked the windows. The bus hummed onward. "You ever wonder," he said, "what your life would be like if you had been born into something else?" Carmen looked him in the eye. "Every day. But I also know who I am because of where I came from. I wouldn't trade it." Nathaniel leaned back, silent. He wasn't sure he could say the same. Later, in his seat, he couldn't sleep. Carmen's words echoed. Who was he really, stripped of money and expectations? As thunder rolled and the highway stretched before them, Nathaniel Halith, man who had everything, began to realize he had nothing that truly mattered. And somewhere along that stormy stretch of road, something inside him shifted. A detour, perhaps, or destiny. The bus glided westward, slicing through early afternoon drizzle like a silver blade. Nathaniel sat in his reclining leather seat, the landscape blurring into colorless streaks. His phone buzzed repeatedly, each notification another demand, another expectation, another problem to solve. But for once, he let them pile up. Instead, he watched Carmen. From the front cabin, she maneuvered the bus with absolute ease. Her shoulders were relaxed, hands firm on the wheel, gaze locked ahead. The traffic, the narrow curves, even impatient drivers barely seemed to rattle her. She drove like it was second nature, like she belonged behind that wheel. Nathaniel wasn't used to people like her, people who carried quiet authority without trying. At the next rest stop, passengers filed off for food and fresh air. Nathaniel lingered by the coffee station, glancing through the tinted windows. Carmen was assisting an elderly woman down the steps, one hand steadying her elbow, the other holding an umbrella over both their heads. She laughed at something the woman said, her smile wide and real. "She's something, huh?" The voice came from beside him. It was the professor from early Arabert, if he recalled. "She treats everyone like they matter," Robert added. "Doesn't care if you're rich or poor. That kind of dignity's rare these days." Nathaniel nodded, uncertain how to respond. Back on board, the clouds thickened. The bus rocked gently as wind picked up. Passengers settled into seats again, conversations dimming. Nathaniel found himself seated alone for the first time in years, not physically, but emotionally. Even at board meetings, he was surrounded. Even at galas, people flocked. But on this bus, stripped of titles and expectations, there was silence. And in that silence, something began to stir. Carmen returned to her seat and addressed the passengers through the intercom. "Good evening, everyone. We're expecting heavier weather as we cross into Pennsylvania. I'll be taking things slower for safety, but we'll still arrive on schedule. If you need anything, buzz the call button. Thank you for your patience." Professional, clear, reassuring. Nathaniel found himself watching her again, not like a man watching a woman, like a man watching someone different, someone he couldn't buy or impress, someone who lived in a reality he'd never dared touch. After dusk, the bus dimmed. Carmen drove in the hush of night, the glow of dashboard lights casting her in a soft aura. Unable to resist, Nathaniel moved forward. "Is this a bad time to talk?" She glanced at him. "Depends on the topic." He chuckled. "Why law school?" She paused. "Because my father was deported when I was 12. Wrong paperwork, wrong neighborhood, right skin color for us to not ask questions. I remember every second of it. The screaming, my mom trying to hold him, and me, frozen, watching." Nathaniel's chest tightened. "We tried to fight it. Couldn't afford a good lawyer. The court never heard our case properly. He's still in Mexico. I haven't seen him in 10 years. He didn't know what to say. He had never fought for anything real, never watched something precious ripped away without recourse. So, law school," she said simply. "I don't want anyone else to go through that." They drove in silence. Outside, rain lashed against the windows. Inside, Nathaniel felt a storm beginning to brew. He returned to his seat and stared at the ceiling. For once, his thoughts weren't about balance sheets or M&A strategies. They were about Carmen Vega, about her pain, her strength, her laugh. He wanted to know more, not for a report or a pitch, just to understand. He realized with growing clarity, he wasn't just on a detour to Los Angeles. He was on a collision course with something much greater, a truth he'd been running from all his life. And now, finally, he was slowing down enough to face it. The rain hadn't stopped since dusk. Thunder rolled like an angry drum in the distance as the Platinum Express coasted cautiously along the interstate. Outside, the world was a blur of brake lights and water-slick pavement. Inside, the mood was hushed, tense. Carmen's voice broke the silence over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're reducing speed due to flooding conditions. I'll find a safe rest stop shortly. Thank you for your patience and understanding." Nathaniel heard a few murmurs of discontent, but mostly there was resignation. He was glued to the movement at the front of the bus, Carmen's steady hands guiding 20 tons of steel and glass like she was conducting a symphony. He had never felt so powerless and oddly comforted. Lightning forked across the sky. Nathaniel's fingers curled around the leather armrest, not out of fear of the weather, but because his insides felt just as unstable. Something about the way Carmen sat alert, centered, reignited something in him that couldn't be explained. She was like no one he had ever known. They pulled into a dimly lit rest area an hour later. Carmen emerged from the driver's seat, soaked from checking the exterior. "I'd like everyone to remain on board," she announced gently. "The wind is picking up. We're safer in here." She walked aisle to aisle, checking in on passengers. When she reached Nathaniel, she paused. "You okay?" He nodded. "Fine, then. You don't get scared of storms?" She tilted her head. "I grew up in a neighborhood where storms had names. Fear wasn't a luxury we could afford." Nathaniel gave a dry laugh. "And here I am, afraid of losing a business deal." "Maybe you're afraid of something else," she replied, and moved on. Later that night, he found her in the front galley, poring over a textbook by flashlight. Her legal pad was crowded with notes. She was still in uniform, her dark curls pinned up messily. "You don't sleep much, do you?" he asked. Carmen smiled without looking up. "Not when I can study." "What class?" "Constitutional law." "Why not corporate law? Big money there." "I'm not in it for money. I want to make the system better, not bigger." He sat across from her, genuinely interested. "You always speak like that." She finally met his eyes. Only round people who actually listen. The conversation turned, slowly, then deeply. He shared stories about his father's expectations, the demands, the empire that was built for him before he was old enough to choose. She shared her mother's sacrifices, her sister's dreams, her father's deportation. To people, two worlds. But in that moment, they were one firelit space in the back of a cold steel bus, talking like they'd known each other for years. He asked, "Do you ever get tired of being strong?" "All the time," she said. "But when you don't have a safety net, you learn to fly so low." He looked at her as if seeing the stars for the first time. By dawn, the storm cleared. The Platinum Express rolled onward. Nathaniel didn't touch his phone once, because for the first time in his adult life, what lay ahead wasn't a merger or a meeting. It was possibility. Real, human, terrifying possibility. And it was sitting right in front of him, behind the wheel. Morning broke with a reluctant sun peeking through thin cloud cover. The bus had resumed its journey through the heartland, slicing across endless fields and towns that looked like forgotten postcards. Carmen was back at the wheel, her expression calm, but focused. Nathaniel couldn't stop glancing forward. Something had shifted overnight. He felt it in the way he moved, in the way he breathed, in the way he saw her. Halfway through Ohio, his phone buzzed. "James, Nate, your father is furious. He's already in LA. He expects you at the Beverly Hills Hotel by 6 p.m. tomorrow. He's hosting the investors and..." "What else?" Nathaniel asked, feeling the knot tighten in his chest. "Miss Chen is arriving too. Your father plans to announce the engagement publicly." Nathaniel's breath hitched. He didn't respond. He ended the call. He turned to see Carmen watching him through the rearview mirror. "Bad news?" she asked when they stopped for fuel. He hesitated. "Arranged engagement. For the sake of a merger." Classic billionaire drama. Carmen arched a brow. "And what does the protagonist want?" He met her eyes. "The protagonist doesn't know yet, but he's starting to figure it out." That night, as the bus rolled into Missouri under a sky scattered with stars, Nathaniel found Carmen on break, seated alone at a picnic bench beside the rest area. "I thought you might want company," he said. Depends. Are you going to talk mergers again? He laughed, then shook his head. No, tonight's about truth. He sat beside her and began to talk about his life, his pressure, the image he'd spent years constructing, and the emptiness underneath it. He talked about how she made him see the cracks. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, eyes steady, heart open. When he finished, Carmen leaned in slightly. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you believe people like us could ever really belong in the same world? Nathaniel exhaled. I don't know, but I think we could make a new one. And there it was, second strike of lightning. The first was when he saw her. The second was when she didn't look away. Back on the bus, as others dozed, Nathaniel sat behind Carmen's seat. I don't want to go back, he said softly. You have to, she replied. Your father, your company, your future. What if I want a different future? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, then fight for it. But know what you're giving up. I know exactly what I'm risking. What I don't know is if I'll ever get another chance like this. Like you. She gripped the wheel tighter, her voice barely above a whisper. We're not built for fairy tales, Nate. Then let's build something real. Outside, the lightning returned, flashing across open skies. Inside, the fire between them finally found its spark. They crossed the Colorado state line under a morning sky still smudged with night. Snow-capped mountains loomed in the distance, glowing faintly gold in the first blush of dawn. Nathaniel stood at the back of the bus, one hand braced against the luggage rack, the other gripping his phone. His father's voice was like gravel. You'll be at the hotel by 6. The dinner is at 7. The engagement will be announced at 8. Do not embarrass me. Nathaniel didn't respond. He ended the call. Carmen stood near the door, watching him. You okay? No, he said honestly, but I know what I have to do. At the next rest stop, Carmen got a call of her own. Her mother's voice trembled. Roser had collapsed at school. Appendicitis. Surgery needed. No insurance. Carmen's face went pale. She hung up and leaned against the side of the bus, wind tussling her hair. Nathaniel came running. What happened? She explained, her voice flat. How much? He asked. I'm not taking your money. It's not charity, Carmen. It's me investing in someone who matters to someone I care about. She stared at him, fighting back tears. It's $50,000. He dialed James. Transfer it now. She needs the hospital name. Carmen covered her mouth. Why are you doing this? Because I can. Because you would do the same for me. She turned away, eyes glistening. They rode in silence for a while. Then Nathaniel leaned forward. Do you believe in fate? Carmen tilted her head. I believe in choices. What if I choose you? That's not just a choice. That's a war. Against your family, your legacy. He nodded. Then I'll fight. They didn't speak after that. But something passed between them, a pact without words. As Los Angeles came into view, the mood in the bus shifted. Passengers gathered their belongings. Phones lit up. The return to reality had begun. Carmen's hands gripped the wheel tighter. Nathaniel sat motionless. The skyline shimmered in the distance. So close, too close. He reached for his bag, but what he wanted to carry wasn't in it. It was sitting in the driver's seat. Brave and impossible, and everything he never knew he needed. And he was about to leave her behind. The Platinum Express coasted into Union Station, under a sky already blooming with city light. A web of glass and metal enclosed the terminal, and the buzz of Los Angeles surrounded them. Inside the bus, the passengers stirred, but Nathaniel sat still. His phone buzzed. James, your father and Miss Chen wait at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Car is waiting. He showed the screen to Carmen. Her eyes scanned the message. Sophia Chen, she said. She's beautiful. I saw her in Forbes once. Nathaniel's throat tightened. Beauty isn't everything. No, but it helps, she said. Her tone wasn't bitter, it was final. The passengers began to disembark. Carmen stood at the door, her uniform crisp, her smile mechanical. Thank you for choosing Platinum Express, she said to each one. When Nathaniel reached her, he paused. Thank you for saving me. You saved yourself, she replied. I was just the detour. More than that. Behind him, a driver in a suit cleared his throat. Mr. Hale, the car is waiting. Carmen nodded. Go, before your father calls again. He stepped off the bus, but after a few paces, he turned around. She was already climbing back into the bus, and just like that, she was gone. The Beverly Hills hotel gleamed like polished ivory. Nathaniel stood in the suite, wearing a tuxedo tailored to perfection. His father sipped bourbon. The deal is everything, Theodore said. After tonight, our family legacy will be unstoppable. Nathaniel looked at his reflection. Unstoppable, or unlivable. Sophie arrived, graceful and poised. You look good, she said. He smiled politely. You too. The ring his father had chosen sat on a velvet cushion. It felt like a noose. The ballroom buzzed. The investors applauded. Theodore raised his glass. And now, the engagement you've all been waiting for. Nathaniel stood. Before that, I have something to say. The room silenced. He looked at Sophie, then at his father, then beyond them, to a road he hadn't yet traveled. I'm not getting engaged tonight, because I'm already committed to a different life. Gasps echoed. Theodore's face turned to stone. Nathaniel stepped back from the microphone and walked out, into the city, into freedom, toward Carmen. 2 years later, the sun warmed the quiet courtyard of a small East LA community center, where folding chairs were arranged with careful precision and bright papal picado fluttered overhead. The smell of fresh tamales drifted from tables in the corner. Children ran with pinwheels. Laughter floated in the air. Nathaniel Hale sat near the back, wearing jeans and a linen shirt. No tie, no trace of the empire he once ruled. But beside him sat Carmen, radiant in a sundress, her hand tucked in his. On stage, Rosa stepped forward as her name was called. Dr. Rosa Vega, the announcer said. The room erupted in cheers. Carmen clutched Nathaniel's hand tighter. She did it. She did, he whispered. Life had not been easy. When Nathaniel walked away from his father's legacy, he had little more than a bank account, a vision, and a heart newly awakened. He poured what he had into building something from the ground up, a startup focused on equitable housing solutions, creating homes for the people who had been invisible in his previous world. Carmen graduated law school and joined a nonprofit that fought for immigrant rights and housing justice. The work was messy and endless, but she never lost sight of why it mattered. They lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment. No more limos, no more boardroom glass towers, just shared groceries, late-night study sessions, and Saturday walks to the farmer's market. And love, so much love. As the ceremony wound down, Rosa made her way through the crowd and threw her arms around her sister. You saved my life, she said. Both of you did. Carmen smiled through tears. You gave us a reason to fight harder. Rosa turned to Nathaniel. Thank you for seeing us, for choosing us. Nathaniel looked around. The faces, the joy, the purpose. He hadn't just chosen Carmen. He had chosen a new way to live. Later that night, beneath a canopy of paper lanterns, Nathaniel took Carmen's hand and led her to a quiet corner. I used to think success meant yachts and skyscrapers, but I was wrong. Success is watching Rosa walk across that stage. It's watching you walk into a courtroom knowing you're going to make a difference. He knelt down and opened a simple wooden box. Inside was a silver ring, to braided bands representing their intertwined paths. Carmen Vega, you changed my life. You showed me who I could be. Will you marry me? She cupped his face, tears spilling. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The courtyard burst into applause. Rosa whooped. A child squealed and tossed confetti. Nathaniel stood, pulled Carmen into his arms, and kissed her beneath the stars. He no longer needed the fast lane. He had found the right road. The end.